Today, I'm excited to have Navdeep Singh on the podcast. Navdeep is the CEO and co founder of Kandor, a new platform that leverages AI in order to help students pass exams like the IELTS and also provides consulting to international students to try to figure out what's the best university for them and their goals. Navdeep started his career working at companies like Flipkart and then later went on to found Loonicorn, a content startup that had over 40K students. He then joined Ola as a product manager, Fareportal, and then went on later to create Kandor. He also has an MBA from Cornell and a BTech from IIT. I think it's really interesting to have people like Navdeep on the podcast just to get some insight into how some of the advancements of AI are enabling tools that you don't necessarily see covered in the media. And in this case, help a whole new generation of students that didn't necessarily have the access to the resources that they have today be able to tap into them and achieve their goals on a global basis. So that said, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hey Navdeep, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey Daivik, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on. But, the first question I always ask everyone is what got you into entrepreneurship and startups?
Um, I think I realized three things about myself. Basically, the first thing was that I don't give up easily. So that's one of my key strengths. Second has been that I'm good with people. Normally, so far, nobody has left the team, or in previous roles also, I've had really great co-workers, and I was able to build relationships with really difficult business partners. So I thought that I can lead a good team. So that's the second thing. And the third thing was that I think I'm not very smart, but I do think that I learn very quickly from my mistakes,
Mhm.
and I'm good at a bunch of things, basically jack of all trades. So I figured that given these three skill sets, um, I think the biggest payoff for me would happen in entrepreneurship. And lastly, for the last 3 4 months, I think I realized that entrepreneurship is hard, and I think that's why I probably want to do it, I guess. Like, I want to do
Right.
the hardest thing possible. Like, that's why I tried um tried to get into like IITs, or try to get into a Ivy League, do really well at job. So basically, I think it's challenging, and I think I like challenges basically.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. If you're going to invest the time anyway, you might as well go for the highest risk, highest reward thing you can do, which is probably entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, yeah. I know. There's a very fine line between between stupidity and bravery, basically. So,
Right.
I sometimes I feel it's a very noble journey. I'm sure you would have read this very cliche cliche basically book. I think Paulo Coelho. I don't remember.
Oh, The
Basically, like
Alchemist?
the Alchemist. Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, he always talks about like uh, the journey, basically.
Hmm.
So I feel like this is that for me, I guess.
Hmm.
I'm obviously not sure about the outcome. So I feel like that. See, basically, it's not just that the startup is growing. You're also growing with it,
Right.
right? And basically, what happens is, like, what I've been observing is that if you don't fix something, right, like if there's some issue with you, like for example, you have to work on some of your habits that you're not proud of. Basically, entrepreneurship and challenges like this provide a very ideal environment for you to fix them, basically,
Right.
because they get exposed
Hmm.
very quickly. And I was yeah, it's a, what do you call it, uh, adulting hard. Entrepreneurship is adulting harder,
Right.
basically.
That makes sense. And I think that's probably one of the biggest differences between the corporate life versus the startup life. Where in the corporate life, if you make a mistake, of course, it can reflect back on you and be negative. but at the same
Yeah,
time, it's usually not life or death. While when you're at a startup, one mistake can really make a huge impact. And it's not about, oh, I made this mistake. Will my manager look down upon me or will I get my next raise? It's, oh, I made this mistake and I don't know if I'm going to have work tomorrow because, the company might, the
yeah,
company might
yeah.
drown.
Yeah, I'm basically like I think there was some funny tweet where basically like life of a founder, wake up at like 9 a.m. meeting for 2 hours, then cry for 4 hours, then meeting for 1 hour, then cry for 5 hours.
Right.
And I relate to it. I genuinely relate to it. I feel like there's so many moments in the day where I'm like cursing myself to the core. Like, why am I that stupid? Why did I make that mistake?
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, it's fun. Yeah, it's brutal, but it's fun, I guess.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
it's good. It's nice to hear the other side because I think, especially on, like, where I'm subscribed to on Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff, you always hear all the rosy stuff about doing startups, like, oh, I get so much value out of leading a team, all of this, all of that. But very few people talk about, like, the pressure and the amount of stuff you have to deal with as an entrepreneur, and it's really not that rosy a lot of the times, right? So it's
yeah.
interesting to hear that perspective.
Yeah, and I think look at like what's happening right now. It's basically the season of market correction. Like all the people who basically were the rock stars for the last 2 3 years, like SBF, like people you would see, oh man, this guy built a $1 billion business in like 4 years, and like the Adanis,
Yeah,
basically
that's the
like
latest
people
one.
who built massive wealth in like last 8 10 years, and you're wondering, yeah, am I that idiot? And like, see that. So basically, I feel like right now, I think this is how it's supposed to happen. Look at the really good companies, though. Like, for example, like the ones that who are doing decently well right now, like the Stripes.
Yeah.
They have been in the business for like 14 years, right? Like people forget that, right? And I have some really sad stats to share, but if you look at like the first 10 unicorns that India had from 2008 to 2014, like 15, 16.
Yeah.
Of those 10 unicorns, basically only two survive right now, like Flipkart and one other. The other eight have lost their unicorn
Oh
valuations
wow.
or basically are doing really bad on the stock market. So I think it it is hard work. Uh, Unfortunately, the media has glorified it, uh, and I think even if you watch all those fancy podcasts like All In and All, and you look at the stats, basically, it's gonna be really bad in the next like 1 year or 2 year.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think so. One more stats around the same. Basically, that I think in the last decade, like from 2011 to 2020, I think there were just 100 or so unicorn IPOs or something like that. Uh, Currently, there are 1,000 unicorns right now,
Right. Yeah.
and interest rates are high. Last decade, interest rates were lower. Still, you had so few exits. Now, what's going to happen this time?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I mean, we already see that, right? So many. First of all, there's so many companies that went the SPAC route, and now they're getting demolished in the market. And then there's
yeah,
some unicorns who didn't go, but their valuations went sky high. A lot of them started hiring like crazy, and not even the unicorns, even big tech companies. But let's just talk about the unicorns in this case. And now they're going through layoffs because they realize it's not sustainable. The money's not going to keep coming in forever, and their evaluation has gone down by billions. Um, I
yeah.
think even recently I was reading something that I think Stripe was trying to raise at their $80 billion and they were valued at $80 billion, but
I think they are raising at 60 billion now,
they're raising at six
haircut
billion.
of 36%, some 30% from the last one, but it's still really like good because the fact of the matter is that for overall they have only raised like $3 billion so far.
Right,
So I think it's not a very massive like down round.
right.
The massive down rounds are the ones in India. Like I don't know if you know Baiju, the biggest edtech player in the world.
Mm-hmm,
It has been marked down by 70%,
mm-hmm,
from $22 billion to something around $6 or $8 billion.
mm-hmm.
it has raised, I think, about $5 billion. So basically, there's a big chance, like a lot of like employees would not get any value out of their stock options.
Right.
So it's going to be pretty bad, to be fair, if you ask me. Yeah,
Right.
but I guess some really good companies would come out of it, hopefully. Yeah.
Right. Well, so let's talk about what you're building at Kandor, and hopefully that can be one of the good company that comes out of it. And you're specifically focused in the student area, EdTech realm of things. So to give our viewers some context, Kandor is a platform that is catered towards helping international students get to the colleges that they want to get to. And so I know one of the focuses has been on the IELTS exams at Kandor and helping students pass that so they can get to the universities that they want to. And before we get into before we get into some of my thoughts on the platform, I'd love to know what was the motivation behind creating it. What was that inspirational moment where you're like, you know what, I think this is something I need to start working on.
And so I have a very interesting journey, basically. So to give our users some background, um, I was working as a product manager here in New York City, working with a travel tech company called Fareportal. It manages brands like Cheapo Air, One Travel. So I basically had uh, engineering resources from Ukraine, India, New York. So like the way we are talking right now, basically. So so I was not able to understand the accents of my Ukrainian counterparts and vice versa. So I thought that for the first time there's a machine sitting between two people,
Mm-hmm.
so it should do a lot of things, right? So I thought that there could be real time transcription, real time translation, basically like sensors, so that you can clearly gauge my basically like uh, like
Pronunciation.
how am I feeling right
Mm-hmm.
now, automatic notes and everything. So that was the original idea. So it was in late 2020. So I pitched this idea to my Ukrainian counterpart, Alex. So he became my co-founder. So I have a Ukrainian
Oh,
co-founder.
okay.
Like Candor, engineering team is based out of Ukraine. So that's also like something like Russian-Ukrainian war has like affected us
Right.
like in indirect ways. So yeah. Anyways, carrying on. So we started building this smart video conferencing platform. Then COVID happened, and then we realized we were late to the party. And it became very clear that the penetration that the existing players like Zoom and Teams saw, it was very clear it was that we would not be able to compete. There are lots of other reasons why we decided to pivot. So then we pivoted to Grammarly for verbal communication, basically. So we built a tool where you could record yourself and we give you feedback on your verbal communication skills. Like for example, how correct your pronunciation is, how good your fluency is, your filler words, confidence levels, emotions, grammatical mistakes. So we launched that product. The bunch of companies that is doing right now, Poise and some others, Udemy and stuff, something like that. So we launched it, and then I realized it that the moment you're done with that important presentation or important job interview for which you were preparing, you stop using the product.
Right.
So I realized that the lifetime value for for the users for Grammarly for verbal communication may not be high. And there's one more difference, right? So in Grammarly is not trying to improve your grammar at all.
Right.
Is not trying to improve your vocabulary. Whereas Grammarly for verbal communication has to improve your communication skills, because you have to do well in that interview. You have to
Yeah.
do well in that presentation or pitch. So you improve, and it's not like a gymming product, like a physical fitness product that you have to keep on using it. Once you become a good podcaster, I don't think you're gonna go back and revise notes or stuff like
Right.
that. So we decided that even though it's a great product, you might not be able to build a $1 billion business out of
Yeah.
it. Then suddenly I realized that people who are taking these language exams are basically are using the platform very actively. You might not be aware of that, but like language exams like IELTS, TOEFL, it's taken by 10 million people.
Yeah.
For comparisons, only 200,000 people take GRE. So it's a 50x big market. And then we realized that for the first time you have this new technology, like this speech to text technology is there, and then you also have this technology of like Grammarly, coherence and stuff. Like a lot of that is now possible. Like you already have seen OpenAI,
Yeah.
like the stuff that it has done. So now the tech is so great that we can probably evaluate your essay on things like task achievement and coherence, right? Similarly, your verbal skills. So we decided to build a practice tool for IELTS. IELTS is the most popular language exam of the lot, like taken by almost 5 million people. And then we realized that if we help them through these language exams, then we could also help them throughout the immigration journey as well,
Right.
or the study abroad journey.
Hmm.
Then that becomes like a huge market, and there is basically like what do you call it, like blessing in disguise. I didn't get my H1B lottery,
Right.
so tried for a couple of times. So I also applied for Canadian PR.
Right.
So all the PR that happen, or like Canadian PR or UK PR or Australian PR, all these immigration plans also require IELTS exam.
Right.
That's also a market.
Okay.
So I actually had to sit for IELTS exam,
Right.
like in 2019 when I was trying to get PR.
Right.
So then I realized, okay, there's a big market, and the starting points is a language exam. So so that's a problem to solve. And and one more point over here. So when I was trying to get into B school here in US, I had to take GMAT 4 times, 4 or 5 times. Like my English was not that
Right.
great. Like so, I could relate to the user as well, and the immigration, the pain of the frustration. So yes, yes, Candor is starting with the IELTS product, but our overall goal is to build a proper immigration or a study abroad platform,
Right.
basically. That's a much bigger problem solved because people are not trying to take IELTS because they want to take those IELTS exams. Their end goal is still studying abroad or immigration. The moment you say these people that okay, you don't have to take this exam to immigrate, they will stop taking this exam.
Right.
So I'm not in the business of that. I'm actually in the business of immigration or study abroad.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's a
So that's a
yes, sir. Good.
yeah, yeah. No, no. So basically, so that's the journey. So it was like you could say that for a while we were basically unfortunately in the bucket of that startups, right? Technology in the search of a problem.
Hmm.
Basically, we were that. So that's why I'm saying uh, like have made a bunch of mistakes. Like that's a very rookie founder mistake. Uh, to be fair, like all those things that I told you, right? Like how Grammarly is different for verbal communication is different. So the pattern matching breaks down
Right.
honestly in a lot of ways. People don't realize it. Like, okay, if Grammarly works for that, the Grammarly for verbal communication should also work and should be a $1 billion business. It might be, to be honest. There people can definitely find a lot of ways to build a business that way also, like by selling it to sales and all. I'm skeptical that it's gonna be a like a decacon
Right.
there.
Right. That makes sense, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting to hear how you've pivoted too, throughout the process because that's a huge thing in startups, right? Pivoting towards different ideas, and just trying to make it work based on what
Hmm.
you think will happen. I think there's a couple things I wanted to touch on there, but I before I get into my main point that I think will carry on for a while, it's actually really interesting that your co-founders from Ukraine and your team's based out of Ukraine. So I know this is a little bit of a
Yeah,
tangent.
yeah, I have a fully remote team. One of my co-founders from
Right.
India. He did his undergrad in design though, uh, from IIT Guwahati, basically my alma mater. And he still learned computer science and got a job in a software company, a really good tech company. Like though he had a design background, yeah, I have a very interesting
Right.
journey. That's why I feel like that I learned a lot, like politics, national stuff, economics. How does that affect like
Well,
startups, economic cycles? So
that's what
yeah,
I'm curious
yeah.
about. That
In-
like, and I'll get into like the product after, but like, how is it working through a war? Like when your developers are in Ukraine and your co-founders in Ukraine, how is that whole process?
Yeah, it sometimes it gets frustrating as well, to be honest. Like when, for example, in December, there were a lot of like electricity
Right.
cuts, and some of our projects got delayed by at least 1 or 2 weeks. It does happen. At the same time, I also think that my Ukrainian team members, um, like I think I see it in a way that like those people are going through so
Yeah.
much and they're still able to support Candor, support our mission. So they're probably stronger people. And I'll draw one more analogy to it. Like look at who are like the most. Have you met Israelis,
Hmm.
like the Jews from there? Bro, they are like on a different class. Like all the training that they get because they're surrounded by like the enemies. Uh, right? They're probably. I think I think Israel is called the startup
Right.
capital of the world. Like build how much technology that they have built. So I feel like, and I followed Israel like because like in my Cornell Tech batch, we had a lot of like Israeli people in the batch. Like Cornell Tech has some association with Israel, like somehow. Like you have, I think 20% of our batch was Jews or
Hmm.
something. Like that was yeah. But yeah, so we also went. We visited Israel. So I feel that when you face so much, like you become mentally very
Right.
stronger, smarter. So I look at it from that perspective that I probably have the some of the strongest and the smartest people on
Right.
my team eventually out of it. So that is the way I treat
Right.
this
No, no,
actually.
for sure. That
Um,
makes a lot of sense, and I think, yeah, it's really inspiring to see how the team's enduring even when going through all of this. Right. That's very impressive.
yeah, yeah. That's why it's been a ride,
Right.
honestly. Yeah, I was like, I'm thanking my stars every
Yeah,
day.
for sure, for sure. But no, like, so I guess touching on the other point I wanted to talk about is, I think especially like in the last even the last 5 years, I think we've seen a huge influx of international students, wanting to move out,
Hmm.
to go to university in the U.S., Canada, UK, from countries like India, China, Bangladesh, all over the place. So it's and I know, like, when I go back to India, one of the biggest, because of the amount of people that are moving, there's so many businesses and so many advertisements cater towards getting students abroad. So it's a huge market. And you really get the full scope of it when you're there, but you can even get a good scope of it in North America as well. So I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because you're catering to this audience. Like, first of all, what do you think is the reason behind such a big, massive influx of students wanting to come, especially in the last 5 years, and being able to come? And can you tell me a little bit more about that
I guess the
market?
biggest reason is that in India we unfortunately don't have access to really high quality education,
Hmm.
college education or post graduation education. In US, like the quality of education that I got was way higher than the
Hmm.
quality of education I got in India actually. And like, see, if you're looking to pursue engineering, probably have only like 15% like so okay only 15,000 like I folks were getting into IIT. Okay,
Right.
then according to some recent study, only 25% of engineers in India are employable.
Right.
So that's the other reason. Like basically, since these people are not employable, so they are looking for like either some training programs, right? Like all these like coding schools have opened up, like but coding schools would only help like people who are interested in engineering. What
Right.
about people who are interested in sales? What about people in operations? What about civil engineers and all that? So for all those like kind of roles, I think you probably have a better career outside India. And honestly, like I personally think that like if you're a like if you're like in the top 1 percentile or like top 5 percentile, like I think you probably would have a better lifestyle. Like as an Indian, let's just
Hmm.
focus on India right now.
Yeah.
like you'd probably have a great career in India, like the Flipkarts and the Olas would pay you really high salaries. But I guess for a average person, the opportunities in India are still not great.
Right.
In US, you would probably end up earning like a average salary of 70, 80K, and you still would have a very good lifestyle. Like
Right.
basically, even if you're not doing like a tech job, let's say even if you're in like sales role, or let's call it like an operations role, like in US you still have a very good salary, right? Because of the minimum wage and stuff like that. So I guess
Right.
that's a very big reason why people want to move on. And then there's reasons like, for example, they don't want to they don't want to get married, and there's some like funny reasons also to move abroad. And for in some states like Punjab, like from what I have observed, like the local industry is dead.
Right.
So the youth don't
Sorry.
have a job
I,
here.
I think you're covering your mic again.
Oh yeah, yeah, my bad. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so for example, like in some states, like in Punjab, like you say, right, like there's a running joke that Canada is like the is basically like is
The safe
another
haven.
Punjab. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like you know, if you're a Punjabi now, you're trying to get a PR or trying to get visa, there's a 25% higher probability that your visa will get rejected, even if
Right.
you're a topper, because Canada is trying to block people from coming from Punjab, block students coming from Punjab. But the
Right.
reason why Punjabis want to move abroad is because Punjab, like the local industry, is almost dead.
Right.
So jobs, lack of good quality education, and I think Indian middle class is getting richer, so parents are also okay now, like sending their kids abroad. When
Right.
I was coming, like my parents were like so worried and concerned. Now, like when I we talk to students, like who are trying to move abroad, it seems that the parents are pushing them.
Right.
Beta, why don't you look abroad? Because what also happens, has also happened is, people don't realize it. Like these are some of my theses now. You're watching Netflix all the time. You're
Yeah.
watching YouTube all the time. You watch all those shows like Friends and all. You want to live that lifestyle,
Right.
right? Like you basically you want to be a global citizen, like travel buddy and all that, like all those like Bollywood movies, and I think so that's why, like, and then you have your relatives, right? Now those relatives are posting photos
Yeah.
uh, on Insta, right? Sharing stories. So that is also pushing people. Okay, I want to explore that. I want to explore that. So I think
Hmm.
there are a bunch of reasons which is pushing people to study abroad. If you ask, yeah.
Right. Right. That makes sense. It makes sense. And yeah, no, I think it's gonna be interesting to see. That I mean, like I said, I think it's gonna be interesting to see how the business expands because I think I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon. Um,
Yeah.
outside of the government deciding it should slow down, but I mean, like the Canadian government and the U.S. government and all these
Government
institutions.
will stop immigration maybe, but then they're not going to stop higher education, because that's one way they're getting good
Yeah,
talent
and good
from India.
money, and really good
And
money because their tuition is three or
uh,
four times compared to local tuition. So
correct.
makes a lot of sense. And I think let's transitioning into the product a little bit. I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but you know, a lot of the I think what was really interesting is a lot of the focus right now on AI has been, especially lately, has been on generative AI, and so focusing on the photos, like the AI generated photos. Now we're getting to videos, we're getting to music. I know Google just released something along those lines, and I think those are really great advancements, and they have a lot of potential. But I think for me, what really excites me with the advancements in AI, and what's sort of gone under the radar with stuff like Whisper and some of the other frameworks that have come out,
Yeah, yeah,
is is the how the advancements allow for products like the one you're building, like having
yeah.
speech to text transcription, being able to translate better, being able to create new products that are part of these advancements at all as well that haven't necessarily been in the public media as much. So I was just wondering, like, when you think about some of these advancements in AI from the product context and specifically for Candor, like what is your thought process behind that, and how do you incorporate those technologies into your product?
So I think the way I see it is that most of the ML, basically like the basic models, are gonna get commoditized.
Mm-hmm.
Azure eventually is gonna get like basically start offering all the OpenAI services, right? As API that is already been doing. Similarly, I'm sure Amazon would find something, and
Yeah.
Google would find something. So what's going to happen is that I think a lot of like SaaS startups were basically trying to build like applications for like software companies. They're gonna face a lot of competition from these big companies, but and at the same time it's going to become very easy for other players to copy you,
Right.
and basically, so for example, like we build a lot of stuff for speech to text from scratch and stuff like that. Now there's a big possibility that upcoming new upstart basic new startup would start building something directly on top of OpenAI or ChatGPT, and then all the learnings that that we had probably may look maybe dwarf. Like the product may not look as mature as theirs. So I feel like from that perspective, what really matters is that you incorporate that, but then you start building like domain specific models on top of it.
Right.
See, so I see from that perspective that yes. At the same time, I also feel that especially in a startup, right? Like the problem that is like it's not a problem. I think it's a tricky situation, frankly. Like because the speed with which they're innovating, right? For example, I built a model, let's say on like Whisper, as you talked about, or let's say Chat GPT 3.
Right.
It's gonna get outdated so soon with Chat GPT 4,
Yeah.
right? And then I would have to rebuild all that architecture, right? Rebuild all those data pipelines, right? And then there could be another startup somewhere who basically like looks at Chat GPT and thinks of a completely different solution, right?
Right.
Like because when I was thinking, right, like even though I would have a solution to that problem, but at some level it gets governed by like what tools do I have at my uh, um, in my arsenal to solve that, right? Like, and the person is starting with a different toolkit altogether. so
Yeah.
so I feel I actually so in my head, I think what we need to do as startups is that we have to be very flexible with the tech then. And we have to design our tech in a way, okay, that OpenAI, this model is coming within small time, like a very big model will come. And at the same time, the applications that we are building, the product that we are building, I think we have to become like we have to start building like more domain specific exercise. Like the main AI APIs could be the same, but everything around it
So
has to be very,
I think
very like domain specific.
I
Yeah,
think you
sorry.
covered your
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
Yeah.
Very domain specific, product specific, and then incorporate API AI in every part, and then constantly, quickly updated. Your architecture has to be in a way that you are able to shift to like better APIs or better tech faster. Yeah. So that's how I see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. No, I think I think that's so important. Like you, what you mentioned, there's technologies can be duplicated. So if you focus on the technology itself and just make a nice wrapper for it, somebody's gonna copy you. So you need to have domain specific tech that allows you to separate yourself from your competitors. Um, and so I think that's going to be really important going into the future. As well as on top of that, because everybody has somewhat of the underlying technology there available. Uh,
I think you have to focus because of this tech. I think focusing on niche becomes very important.
right,
Basically,
exactly,
that's the only way you're gonna survive. Otherwise, um, like I think a lot of VCs are interested in SaaS businesses right now. That's the hot business model right there. I feel like with all these integration with this Azure coming up, it's gonna be some of these businesses are probably gonna face a lot of headwinds
right,
coming their way. in the next decade at least. That's what I feel. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, please
No, no,
continue.
and I mean that makes a lot of sense, right? Like when it becomes consolidated into something like Azure, AWS, why would you use independent service providers if all the rest of your cloud applications are through them? So that makes a lot of sense, and I think, yeah, I think what's so important there is that niche that you mentioned. So I think that's probably what's going to survive going forward. You're right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And you have to constantly think that what this new tech can do, which you probably thought, okay, you were solving the old way. So you need to unlearn very fast given this rapid innovation that we are seeing.
right, right. That makes sense. Well, okay. So I mean, now that I created some MVP at Candor, and you're trying to figure out where the product is. I guess the next step would be growing the application, acquiring users, and moving the business towards being profitable and ultimately getting VCs to invest. And so I know you're probably nearing that stage. I'm not sure if you're there yet, or if you're almost there. But when you think about growth and acquiring users, what are some key considerations that you factor in there?
So I think, I guess for a while now, like I think most of us, I think that's a very interesting question that you have asked, and I think in the context, in the current context, it matters even more basically, because see, I think in last decade, basically, like the fancy metrics were MAU, right, and DAU and all that. I guess now with higher interest rates and probably sanity in the market, right? I think the focus is probably going to shift from like the user acquisition to revenue acquisition,
Hmm.
I guess. So I think now, I guess the quality of the user matters as much as the quantity of the users, I guess.
Right,
So I think in Candace's case, basically, like I guess we are at that stage where I think for us there are two aspects to it. Like uh, I'm framing my answer while I'm answering to you. So one thing is that you need to get better at the art of acquiring users, like from the marketing channels, because that is obviously a lever.
right,
Like for example, like for us, like what sort of like content works, right? Like what sort of channels work, like Instagram works, or whether basically YouTube Shorts work, or basically, or there's a another interesting way to get like uh, like customer acquisition, like giving the product for free. So that's one tangent, like figuring out. So let's say if you have figured out the business model, then you can scale it.
right,
So you need to build that skill set. Marketing is also a basically a skill set, or could be your startup's area of like quantitative sorry competitive advantage. And so that's one dimension that I look at. And the second dimension I look at it is that, like, at our stage, like, we should not be spending too much money in acquiring user. We should be growing through word of mouth,
right,
because at the end of the day, like, your product has to sell yourself,
right,
right? So you should not, your goal should not be that, okay, I'm going to win this game by marketing or by customer acquisition. A lot of companies have done that. Of seven edtech unicorns in India, six are unprofitable. Most of them may probably spend $2 to earn a single dollar of revenue, like $2 minimum.
right,
Many of them burn $5 to earn $1 of revenue. So then you start thinking that way. And I don't want to build a company with bad product, because then you gonna fail eventually. So for me, customer acquisition is like I need to get better at it. So when I have a great product, like the product has matured, and when like my ROI on the ROAC is very high, like return on my advertising spend, right? Like then it should be very high. Like I should be able to spend thousands of dollars, and then it should give me a good ROI,
right.
because it cannot happen that I'm just growing through word of mouth, and then one day I start doing customer acquisition, and then I'll get like 100x ROI. No, it is like a muscle,
Right.
right? You have to get better at it. So that's how I look at it, customer acquisition. it's not like a main thing for me, but I need to get better at it. So when the product is more mature, uh, I could like quickly grow it.
Right. That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Uh,
And I mean, I think especially,
it's a slightly different approach.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, and I think especially with products like this, I at least based on what I've seen, a lot of it's been, of course, there's been some initial marketing, but a lot of it has been, a lot of the big growth has been from word of mouth. And I think when you look at the market in general, the most successful products are the ones where you have a community of people who are going to vouch for your product because they got a lot of value
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah. And it's this common knowledge that of the $100 that are raised by startups from VC, $40 go directly into the hands of Google, Facebook, and all the marketeers.
Right.
So, so you have, and that's why you have that situation where 1,000 startups are unicorns, and only 200 are going to get to the
Right.
exit. So you just going to build a very fundamentally uh, weak business at the end of the day.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That makes sense. And I think, you touched on this a little bit, but I guess, my next question to you is like when you think about the future of edtech and specifically we can talk about Indian edtech, what really excites you about it and what are your thoughts? Like, do you think it's going to be a field that keeps growing exponentially that we've seen, or do you think there's going to be some massive new players come in, or do you think the existing competitors are just going to take over the space?
I think it's an interesting question you have asked. Um, so I have three options: whether incumbents would survive. The second thing is whether new players would emerge, or what was the third option?
The third one's just like, I guess, do you think the space will expand maybe to have the current incumbents surviving, but new players also pop up that and somehow they can coexist together because that's how big the space is now.
I think it's obviously I guess see, India is obviously a very big country, like, and we are a very hyper aspirational
Hmm.
people. Like, let's not forget that. Like every like and so from that perspective, I definitely think that there are gonna be some billion-dollar businesses in it. Like, we already have a bunch of
Right.
them, right? So I do think that just some of the existing ones probably would go through a difficult phase for the next 1 year or 2 year, and then they would emerge stronger out of it. Uh,
Hmm.
some of them will definitely see huge down rounds and all. Some of them may not survive, to be honest. Like, I do think
Right.
so. Like I told you, right? Like of the 10 unicorns that were there in the beginning, only one or two survived, right? So that's definitely gonna happen. At the same time, I do think that right now, like, investors have become overcautious, so funding is not going into edtech. I think that's going to push a lot of startups and founders like myself also to think of better distribution methods, will push us to build better products, will push us to think for better business models. So I do think that this is definitely gonna uh, push like gonna basically push the new startups to think differently, and that's gonna result into the newer startups doing
Right.
well. I think if I have to put my money, I think I'll probably put my money on newer startups than the older ones. And obviously there is a bias, but to be fair, the older startups, like all the existing unicorns, they were really good at
Right.
scaling. Hats off to them, like Byju's and academies. Like, okay, they might not be profitable, I agree. But at the same time, I think they did a great job at scaling, and then probably like at least they became the top players in their
Right.
categories. That amounts to something. So credit where credit is due, to be fair.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's funny. There's a joke. I think he was in Silicon Valley, which is a TV show, and the guy is pretty much saying something along the lines of, profitability, no, just scale users and we'll figure profitability later. And I feel like that's, as much as a joke in the show, I feel like that's a lot of the mentality that a lot of the unicorns have taken, especially in the last 2 years with the amount of investor money that got thrown at them before this downturn. So it'll be interesting to see who survives, even without profitability.
Yeah, you're right. You're
Um,
right. You're right.
but
Yeah.
perfect. No, it was great having you on the podcast. I really enjoyed listening, hearing about you and Kandor and getting to get your thoughts on all these different subjects. Before I let you go, I have two last questions. The first one being, is there a book that you recommend us checking out or reading?
A book. I think I'm gonna name the obvious ones to be fair, but I think Zero to One by Peter Thiel is obviously great. And I think I'm a fan of um, basically like smaller books. Like I don't want to. I think I consume information more from
Right.
podcasts and all. But if we are talking about written content only, I would say Paul Graham's essays are really great. I think they're very very insightful. To be fair, Naval Ravikant, like all the stuff that he says, and obviously I think I mentioned a couple of times like All In
Right.
podcast is
Right.
awesome as well.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, bunch of them, yeah. But yeah, those are the ones that I religiously
Yeah,
follow
no, for
actually.
sure. I
Yeah.
I follow all of those. So I can vouch for them too. It's always good to hear those, and yeah, they have some of the best entrepreneurs in the business. So it's always great to learn from them and get those insights. But yeah,
YC's blog is also great, by the way. Like
YC's blog.
YC's,
Yeah, I know
yeah.
you mentioned a problem searching for a solution, or sorry, a solution searching for a
Yeah.
problem. And I know that's straight out of
Mm.
YC's startup school. I know that's one of the things they always talk about. So uh,
Yeah, it was not that, but to be fair, once we figured out that the first thing was not working, we had a tech it. Like we know that we're just thinking, okay, now how can we build a business on top of this tech?
right.
Yeah,
Right,
kind
that
of.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
But yeah, no. Other than that, my last question for you is: what is the next steps for you and Kandor? What can we look forward to now?
I think so. I guess we've found a business model. I guess that works right now, and I think for us the focus is basically on execution now. In this year, make sure that we survive. Um, Focus on building the right product, building the right distribution, building the right relationships with our users, with our partners, making sure that all of us are successful. I guess focus is the main thing, and constant
Right,
execution. I
right, makes
guess.
sense. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Navdeep. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I hope you're being. It was it would be useful for people who listen to your podcast, and I hope we become famous after that. Yeah, I don't even want to watch it, but let's hope
well,
for the
well,
best.
that's
Yeah.
the hope. But thank you everyone for tuning in, and till the next one, take care.